Persona is on fire, with the series recently confirming to have sold a total of 1.43 million units this year from April to September alone. But what if I told you that SEGA is concerned about the post-launch sales of some of its biggest recent titles? Now, the culprit, according to SEGA, rests in consumer expectations for definitive editions, a staple of Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, dating all the way back to extended re-releases hitting these franchises back in the late 1990s. Could fans' expectations for these extended re-releases be impacting the sales of Atlus's latest games? We're diving into that, along with going over the company's extensive history of re-releases and why they exist, before looking into the present and future to see if these extended re-releases have a place in the current landscape of Atlus's franchises. Smash that like button if you're itching for some big Persona announcements next year for its 30th anniversary, and test your luck in my giveaway of another franchise celebrating its own 30th anniversary in the upcoming Resident Evil Requiem, where you could be one of 3 lucky winners of the Deluxe edition. Hit the link in the description to get started. In recent years, Persona has experienced its most rapid growth to date, becoming one of the biggest and most influential JRPG franchises of all time, with games like Persona 5 Royal continuing to dominate the charts even after the successful launches of games like Persona 3 Reload and Metaphor ReFantazio. SEGA recently shared its thoughts on why these 2 recent titles may have performed worse when compared to Persona 5 Royal's incredible sales tale during a Q&A session with investors during a Q2 financial briefing. During this briefing, SEGA pointed to consumer expectations for definitive editions as a potential cause behind the lower than expected sales for a couple of its recent titles, implying that some fans would rather wait a few years for the inevitable definitive version of said Persona or SMT game instead of buying the new entries on release. This is a very interesting acknowledgement of what some Persona fans have been echoing for years, going back to months before Persona 3 Reload's release, where some players mentioned that they would wait for a more definitive version of the game, largely in part because P3R did not include Persona 3 Portable's female protagonist, Kotone Shiomi, in addition to the 30-hour epilogue, The Answer, being absent at launch. Now, in the case of Persona 3 Reload, with The Answer having been remade into the $30 DLC episode Aegis nearly a half a year after launch, and with the recent confirmation that Kotone Shiomi would never come to Persona 3 Reload, at least officially, since awesome mods do exist, in the eyes of many, Persona 3 Reload, despite all of its embellishments and new features, will never be the most definitive version of the Persona 3 experience. Now, as for Metaphor ReFantazio, Atlus's other big release last fall, that title debuted as the fastest selling Atlus title of all time, selling over 1 million copies on its first day alone. But with the game reportedly having reached the 2 million mark in late spring this year, SEGA's mentioning of consumer expectations for a definitive edition of the title as a potential cause behind the sales slump indicates that the company was hoping for stronger sales of the title post-launch. Now, nothing has been confirmed regarding a potential extended re-release of Metaphor ReFantazio, but a rumor did pop up earlier this year from Ramona on Twitter that echoed what Midori, aka Ryan from the Bronx, last year disclosed, being that Metaphor ReFantazio Retold would be the title for the expanded re-release of that game, hinting that a cut dungeon, potentially more than one new party member, and a story expansion on Luis would be some of this version's new features. Again, this is all speculation and nothing has been confirmed by Atlus regarding the future of Metaphor. But at the end of the day, this is the first time we are hearing from SEGA themselves about Persona 3 Reload and Metaphor's post-launch sales woes and their hypothesized reasonings behind it. Now, in addition to SEGA's definitive version theory as it relates to lackluster post-launch sales, the company made additional remarks pertaining to these titles' marketing that could have played a role in affecting further sales. While we haven't been able to pinpoint a precise cause of the lower than expected sales performance, SEGA told investors, we believe the problem also lies in our marketing, which wasn't able to sufficiently convey the appeal of our games to our users. Now, I have to say that the marketing for Metaphor was actually quite strong, as the demo and the promotion of it a few weeks ahead of its launch garnered significant attention and praise, which likely led to the title selling 1 million copies on its first day. But other than that, Metaphor had a tall hill to climb, especially for it being a completely new game not attached to any particular IP. And with a title as unusual and foreign sounding as Metaphor ReFantazio, being many people's first impression of that game, the title had to really succeed with its demo to make a big impression, of which thankfully it did. Now, let me know in the comments what you think about the definitive edition theory suggested by SEGA, and if you are actually holding off on buying Persona 3 Reload or Metaphor in the hopes that a definitive version of those games will eventually be released. To get a better idea of what SEGA's strategy might be looking ahead, it's important to take a look back at the history of extended re-releases regarding the Persona series, as this franchise has a deep and consistent pattern of enhanced ports, expanded editions, and definitive re-releases that enhance mechanics, add story content, improve combat systems, and in one case, even change the entire game. I'm looking at you, P3P. Starting in 1996 with Revelations Persona, a reworked version of that game released in Japan in 1999 as Persona Be Your True Mind for the PS1, with the PSP remake in 2009 representing a more dramatic update featuring a new soundtrack, new UI, quality of life updates, and restored cut content from the original Western release. This 2009 remake set a precedent for Atlus refining earlier entries years later, and this treatment quickly found its way over to every other mainline Persona game up to this point. 1999's Persona 2 Innocent Sin saw a 2011 PSP remake featuring an improved UI, animated cutscenes, revised character portraits, and more, and signified the first officially English release of Innocent Sin. Its companion piece in 2000's Persona 2 Eternal Punishment saw its own PSP remake land in 2012, featuring the same kinds of upgrades that the Innocent Sin remake received, except this time, the title never made its way outside of Japan. Now, with 2006's Persona 3, this is where we saw numerous high-profile extended re-releases hit the series, as Persona 3 FES in 2007 saw the first, quote, ultimate edition of that title, sporting The Answer, an epilogue that contained upwards of 30 hours of gameplay, a new social link, gameplay balance updates, new personas, equipment, and more. 2009's Persona 3 Portable, a remake of Persona 3 for the PSP, saw significant changes to Persona 3, with the playable female protagonist in Kotone Shiomi largely rewriting the story as it pertains to her, containing new social links, romances, etc. In addition, visual novel-style navigation was employed here due to the PSP's technical limitations. Party-wide control was added for battles, and lots of quality of life updates made this PSP title stand as one of the defining Persona 3 experiences, especially considering the massive content added with the female protagonist. We can't forget about 2024's Persona 3 Reload, where a complete visual overhaul hit the title, along with various gameplay improvements, optional activities, scenes, and more hitting that game. With the Persona 3 Reload expansion pass containing Persona 3 FES's episode Aegis being added to the title as DLC, Reload is seen as the most complete way to experience the original story of Persona 3, but with the title not including Persona 3 Portable's female protagonist, some say that Reload will never be the definitive version of Persona 3. Moving on to 2008's Persona 4, that title's extended re-release in 2012's Persona 4 Golden debuting on the PS Vita saw some huge updates with new social links added, along with a new dungeon, a new epilogue, personas, difficulty options, quality of life updates, new cutscenes, music, and more. Golden essentially defined the add tons of new content and polish philosophy Atlus would later use for Persona 5 Royal, and with the upcoming Persona 4 revival around the corner, it's likely we will see these same aspects that made Golden the definitive edition of Persona 4 stand true in this remake. That brings us to 2016's Persona 5, the latest mainline title, where its 2019 re-release in Persona 5 Royal saw a massive overhaul, featuring a third semester storyline, a new party member, a new palace, new locations, new combat features, new music, gameplay fixes, fixes, and more. Royal is often cited as the biggest definitive edition upgrade in Persona history, and has gone on to be the best-selling game the series has currently seen. Now, the reasoning behind these re-releases is quite simple. 1. The original releases often reveal balance and quality of life issues that Atlus revises later. 2. Earlier titles were bound to earlier consoles and portable systems. Therefore, these re-releases allow for modernization for their current generation. 3. These enhanced editions consistently become the best-selling versions. P4G sold very well on the Vita, and even better once it got ported to PC and modern consoles. And similarly, P5R became the best-selling game in Persona history, and is largely responsible for the continued sales of the series even today. Finally, Persona 3 Reload became the fastest-selling Persona game to date, selling over 1 million copies in just a few days. Because these games are huge titles, often hovering around and above the 100-hour mark, Atlus often finishes ideas in enhanced editions that didn't fit or weren't polished for the original launch, and it will be very interesting to see if Atlus continues to stick to this strategy going forward. Speaking of the present and future of Atlus's re-releases, it is looking unlikely that both Persona 3 Reload and Persona 4 Revival will be getting any sort of re-release, other than, say, a potential definitive edition of Persona 3 Reload that includes the post-launch DLC content. Longtime Persona producer Kazuhisa Wada told GamerWK right when P3R launched that the company was not interested in making an enhanced edition of the title years down the road, like many previous Persona games had done, with, quote, "Currently, we are not considering a revision like with Persona 5 to Persona 5 Royal, which involved significant changes and additions to the original title. So fans can rest assured knowing that Persona 3 Reload offers a complete experience." Obviously, this came a month or so before Atlus revealed episode Aegis and the rest of the P3R DLC, and your definition of whether P3R is a complete experience may vary, but with Wada recently confirming that P3P's female protagonist would never make her way into P3R from an official standpoint, we can basically write off Persona 3 Reload as being finished, and thus will not get the Royal or Golden treatment. Again, in the eyes of Atlus, Reload kind of is their Royal or Golden for Persona 3, just as their upcoming Persona 4 Revival will likely be seen as the true Golden experience for Persona 4, with it being a remake of P4G and all. Now, going forward with Persona 6, we obviously have no idea what future content, if any, will come to that game, but leakers and insiders have all claimed that Persona 6 would be adopting a content strategy similar to Persona 3 Reload, in which the title would be getting further content post-launch in the form of DLC, except that Persona 6 would apparently be getting upwards of 3 years of significant DLC updates, rendering the need to pump out another $70 re-release unwarranted. As for Metaphor, we've already discussed that the title was rumored to be getting a future extended re-release akin to previous Persona games, but that remains to be seen. But at the end of the day, it certainly seems like this could be a turning point for Atlus as they eye a more DLC-centric route for future titles after Persona 4 Revival like they did with Persona 3 Reload. As longtime fans have had the expectation that Atlus would release an extended, more complete version of these titles 2 to 3 years after they release, maybe this would account for the slower sales tale for their recent games when compared to the likes of Persona 5 Royal and Persona 4 Golden. We also live in a different time, where time and money spent is becoming much more important to consumers, with the cost of living and expenses rising around the world, so buying a new Persona game for $70 at launch, just to buy its extended re-release 3 years later for the same amount of money for a decidedly similar, yet improved experience of that same game, may not be worth it for the average consumer. It's wild that Atlus is worried about their sales of Persona 3 Reload and Metaphor when these games have been breaking records for the company, and historically speaking, when compared to previous Persona titles, pre-Persona 5 Royal, these games are still doing quite well. It's just that Persona 5 Royal has been known as the Persona game over the years, standing as the definitive, most content-rich Persona experience yet, and with positive word of mouth of this game guiding the discourse of Persona for the greater part of a decade now, I think we are all really just itching to get past the Persona 3s, Persona 4s, and Persona 5s for once, and finally get the next best thing in Persona 6. Let me know your thoughts in the comments what you think about Sega's statements regarding their re-release theory as it relates to Persona. And come find me over here in this video as we dive deeper into the current state and developments of Persona 6. Got nothing else for ya. I look forward to seeing you all real soon in the next one.